Why did the angel choose a lowly town to announce the arrival of the Son of God? What's the difference between the response of Mary and the response of Zechariah? And why so much stress on the virgin and the virgin birth? Answers to all these questions and more on this episode of Spiritual Sundays. So hello folks and welcome to Spiritual Sundays, your weekly dose of spiritual stuff for the second Sunday of Advent 2019. And we begin today with the first theme, and that is in the 6th month, the angel being sent to Nazareth. And we see that in verse 26, the very fact of 6 months ties the story of Mary to that of Elizabeth. John the Baptist is born 6 months before Christ, and as we know, he prepares the way for Christ. Similarly, Gabriel also announces the birth of John the Baptist to Zechariah. These two stories of Mary and Elizabeth are similar in the sense that neither Mary nor Elizabeth are likely candidates to motherhood. Elizabeth, as we know, is too old, and Mary is still a virgin. And therefore these two stories do have an element of miracle in it. Verse 27a states, "To a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph." Once again here we see that there is a brief mention of Joseph. So in this gospel, Mary takes the lead role, whereas Joseph is playing the supporting actor. And it is slightly different from the Gospel of Matthew, where in the Gospel of Matthew, we see that there is a genealogy of Joseph, and at the same time, we also are told about his intention to dismiss Mary and then the reversal of that decision. Moving on to verse 27b, which states the virgin's name was Mary. And interesting to see here that even in a patriarchal society, Mary is given the center lead. And if you look at the character of Mary, probably she would have been in her early teens, staying with her parents, and as we know, pledged to be married maybe within a year or so. And that takes us to verse 29, which states, "When she saw him, she was troubled at the saying and considered what the salutation might be." And here we see that obviously she would have been surprised at the sight of the angel. And of course, she was probably perplexed too by the words of the angel, as the angel says, "Rejoice, you highly favored one." At first, probably Mary must have been wondering to whom was the angel addressing. And we can thus conclude that she wasn't prepared for this encounter by God. Which takes us to the next point, that is the mission entrusted to Mary. And we see in verse 30, which states, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." And this probably indicates that Mary was afraid, just as Zechariah and the shepherds were. Now, fear is appropriate in the presence of God, and we also know that God tends to show mercy to those who fear Him. And here Mary is favored because she is the chosen one, and therefore she is chosen for an action that is very special, that is very significant for the salvation of us all. Verse 31 to 32 states that, "You will give birth to a son called Jesus. He will be great, called Son of the Most High. He will be given the throne of his father David and will reign over the house of Jacob forever." And another question which we may all have, God could have chosen Jerusalem or any other city, but why did He choose Nazareth, a lowly town, and a town that was tainted by pagan religions that were surrounding it? And the same goes with, why did He choose a lowly person? So once again we can see that a lowly person being chosen in a lowly place for a great deed. And this basically shows that the child is special. And similarly, we can see that in our day-to-day lives, we may sometimes not pay attention to the works that we do. We may feel that, okay, this is a small activity and it doesn't make any sense. But for God, God doesn't look at what we do. He looks at our intentions, He looks at our heart. And therefore, an important person for God is one who loves God and who loves his neighbor. And therefore, we see that God's favor is seen like a two-edged sword, because He shows mercy, but at the same time, there are hardships which we have to deal with. Which takes us to the third point, confusion and acceptance. Verse 34, and here we see the confusion of Mary. How can this be, seeing I am a virgin? Now, there is a difference between the questions asked by Mary and Zechariah. Mary's questions seem to be very natural and one of confusion, whereas Zechariah's questions arise out of doubt. Mary asks for an explanation, whereas Zechariah is asking for a sign. And we move to the fourth point, that is, everything is possible for God. Now, verse 36 states, the angel telling Mary that Elizabeth, your relative, has conceived a son in her old age. And here we may wonder, what is the relation between Elizabeth and Mary? Well, some of us basically say, okay, she was a cousin. But given the age difference, probably you could say that their relationship was one of an aunt and a niece. And here we see that the reference to Elizabeth is made to give Mary some kind of confidence. Now, as we know, Mary was confused, but yet she didn't ask for a sign. So this is something like a sign to give a confidence, saying that even your relative is probably pregnant and 6 months pregnant. Which takes us to verse 37. Everything spoken by God is possible. And here we can have a clear example of when Sarah laughed when the 3 visitors told her that the next time they visit, she would have given birth to a son. And then we can see that the gospel basically seems to be a good news for those who are in suffering, for those who are in impossible situations. And therefore, we come to verse 38, where it says, behold the handmaid of the Lord, let it be done to me according to your word. Mary's response here steps out of faith, and we can assume that probably Mary was one of the first disciples of Jesus. Now, the surrendering to God's will, by doing that, Mary places herself in the hands of God, and the Magnificat which she sings expresses her humility as well as of her joy of being part of God's great plan. However, her journey will not be comfortable. As we know, there will be hardships, there will be sorrows and sufferings. But Mary doesn't give up, neither does she grumble, and neither does she try to escape. And therefore, Mary is a perfect example of faithfulness and of obedience. And finally, we come to the last point, some message, some thoughts to ponder. The first thing is basically that God has a plan for everyone. He has a mission for each and every one of us. If we walk with God, nothing is impossible. And lastly, we see that Mary is an example of obedience to the will of God. So that's it, folks, for this episode of Spiritual Sundays. And as usual, if you have any comments or any constructive criticism, please put them in the comment section. And yes, please do subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to us. Thank you.